The advice you have been given is internally consistent. Be honest. Communicate clearly. Show her how you feel. Be present. Be consistent. Make your effort visible so she understands you are serious. Most men follow this. They follow it carefully, sometimes exhaustingly. They respond to every message. They rearrange their schedule. They make their feelings known before there is any ambiguity left. They demonstrate, through accumulated behavior, that they are available, interested, and trying. And then they watch it not work. Not because she is unreasonable, not because they chose poorly, not because the timing was wrong. It doesn't work because the advice, applied faithfully, produces the exact conditions that make attraction impossible. This is the thing nobody explains. There is a gap, documented, consistent, and almost never discussed, between what women report they want and what the underlying attraction system actually responds to. These two things are not the same. Stated preferences describe what the conscious mind endorses. Behavioral responses reveal what the deeper evaluation system is reacting to. In attraction, those two signals frequently point in opposite directions. What follows is not pickup content. It is not a guide to manipulation or a set of tactics designed to exploit anybody. It is a psychological analysis of why attraction operates the way it does, the actual mechanisms driving it, why they function, and what a man who understands this looks like in practice compared to the man who is trying hard and getting nothing back. Machiavelli spent most of his intellectual life mapping the distance between how power appears to operate and how it actually operates. The men who understood that gap kept their positions. The men who believed the official rules, who played the game as it was publicly described, were the ones who lost. That same structure is running inside every attraction dynamic you have ever been part of. The harder you tried, the further away it moved. That is not bad luck. It is a mechanism, and mechanisms can be understood. In 1997, neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz, along with researchers Peter Dion and P. Reed Montague, published research in the journal Science that changed how behavioral neuroscience understood reward. Their team was studying dopamine neurons, the cells responsible for generating the signal the brain uses to drive motivation, anticipation, and approach behavior. What they found was counterintuitive and has since been replicated extensively. Dopamine neurons do not fire most strongly in response to reward itself. They fire in response to the gap between what was predicted and what actually happened, what the researchers called a prediction error. When an outcome is fully anticipated, the dopamine response drops towards zero. When a reward is unexpected, the response is strongest. When a predicted reward fails to arrive, the signal goes negative. What the brain's reward system was responding to was never the prize. It was the discrepancy between expectation and reality. Certainty in both directions extinguishes the signal. Schultz was working with primates in controlled laboratory settings, but the prediction error framework maps closely to what we observe in human attraction. A person who has become fully predictable has eliminated the discrepancy the reward system responds to. There is nothing unexpected left. The signal it was generating goes quiet. He has not made himself safe. He has made himself inert. There is no longer anything to anticipate because the outcome is already known. The failure most men make here is believing that demonstrated interest signals value. The logic feels sound. If I show her clearly that I care, she will recognize the investment and respond to it. This is how most of life works. Professional effort is rewarded. Persistence builds results. Showing up consistently produces outcomes. Men apply the same framework to attraction and find that it inverts. Here is why. When a man demonstrates consistent interest before interest has been earned through her own investment in the dynamic, he has handed over leverage that was not yet his to give. He is communicating, through behavior rather than words, that his attention is not something she needs to do anything to obtain. She already has it, fully, unconditionally. And what is obtained unconditionally carries a different weight than what was earned. Consider two scenarios. In the first, a man responds to her messages within minutes, every time. He suggests plans the day she mentions she is free. He makes clear through every exchange that she has his full attention whenever she wants it. He is, by every conventional standard, a good communicator and a reliable presence. In the second, a man responds when he is not occupied with something else, sometimes quickly, sometimes hours later. He initiates occasionally, not constantly. He suggests plans, but does not reorganize his week to accommodate hers. His attention is warm when it arrives, and not always immediately available. The second man is not playing games. He is a man whose time is directed toward things he has built. The first man has communicated, through the pattern of his behavior, that she is the primary demand on his attention. The second man has communicated that she is one part of a life that is already full. The brain reads these two signals differently. The first man's attention is abundant and perpetually available. The second man's attention is finite and selectively directed. Finite and selective registers as something worth pursuing. Unlimited and unconditional registers as background noise. The important distinction is that performed unpredictability has a different quality than natural unpredictability. The man who is genuinely occupied does not need to calculate his response time. He responds when the other things he is doing allow him to. The man who is performing it tends to give himself away eventually, because performance is effortful, and effort, sustained long enough, shows through. A man with a genuinely full life solves the prediction problem without thinking about it. Ask a woman what she wants in a partner, and the answers are consistent across demographics, cultures, and age groups. Honesty, kindness, emotional availability. Someone who communicates well, who is present, who makes her feel seen and safe. These responses are genuine. They are also measuring something other than attraction. In 1989, evolutionary psychologist David Buzz published a landmark cross-cultural study in behavioral and brain sciences, involving more than 10,000 participants across 37 cultural groups drawn from 33 countries, on 6 continents and 5 islands. One of the most consistent findings across all of them was a significant sex difference in mate preference. Women rated cues to resource acquisition, earning capacity, ambition, social status, as substantially more important in long-term partners than men rated equivalent qualities. This pattern held across industrialized and non-industrialized societies, across dramatically different cultural norms, across every continent represented. What this measures is not money as a literal object. It is what resource acquisition capacity signals, that this man operates at a level of demonstrated competence and social recognition that goes beyond a single interaction. He has proven himself in a domain that other people recognize and respond to. The distinction matters. A man can be financially ordinary and still carry the status signal if the people around him respond to him with deference, seek his opinion, and follow his lead. Conversely, a man can have substantial resources and carry none of the signal if those resources were inherited or accidental rather than built through demonstrated effort. The evaluation system is not detecting the downstream financial result. It is detecting competence and the social acknowledgement of competence. Social proof operates alongside this. A 2010 study published in Evolution and Human Behavior by Place, Todd, Penke, and Ossendorf, using video recordings of real speed dating interactions, found that both men and women adjusted their interest in potential partners upward after observing those partners in interactions others appeared to find successful. The effect was present in both sexes, though the mechanism differed. What the study identified is that observed mate interest from others functions as information. Other people have evaluated this individual and found them worth pursuing. That updates the prior. The practical implication is that a man who is sought after, respected, and responded to positively in his broader social environment carries that signal into every interaction. It is not something that can be assembled from a single encounter. It accumulates through how people in his life treat him, whether he initiates or responds, whether his presence in a room shifts the dynamic. A man who is primarily occupying the role of pursuer is communicating something about where he sits. The direction of pursuit is itself a signal about relative position, even when neither party has consciously framed it that way. Machiavelli identified the same feedback loop in political life. In The Prince, he observed that the perception of strength attracts alliances and deference that reinforce the strength itself. The belief in a man's position precedes the reality and frequently creates it. Reputation is not a reflection of position. It is a component of position. What the 35-year-old man who has lived this understands is that attraction operates on the same structure. The man who is believed to be worth pursuing draws pursuit. The man who is seen as pursuing draws the conclusion that he has reason to. Skinner's research on reinforcement schedules produced a finding that remains among the most cited in behavioral psychology. The behavior most resistant to extinction, the behavior that persists longest, even after reinforcement stops, is not the behavior that was consistently rewarded. It is the behavior that was rewarded unpredictably. The variable ratio schedule. Reward arrives at intervals that cannot be predicted or anticipated. The nervous system cannot adapt to it, cannot build a reliable expectation. This keeps behavioral engagement elevated in a way that consistent reward cannot sustain. What is being responded to is the possibility of reward, not reward itself. The possibility, because it cannot be ruled out or anticipated, maintains the system in a state of active engagement. Skinner documented this in controlled behavioral settings. But the pattern maps to what we observe in romantic dynamics closely enough that it is worth understanding precisely. A man who is consistently warm, consistently responsive, consistently available, provides something the brain registers as stable background. It adapts. It stops registering the warmth as meaningful because the warmth has been fully priced in. It is no longer new information. It is simply the environment. A man whose attention is intermittent, not because he is engineering intermittency, but because he is genuinely engaged elsewhere, creates different conditions. The moments of connection carry disproportionate weight, precisely because they are not guaranteed. The interaction matters because its continuation is not certain. The brain stays engaged because the expectation cannot close. Psychologist Jack Brehm's research on psychological reactance, first published in 1966, adds the second mechanism. Brehm documented that when a person perceives their freedom to obtain something as threatened or reduced, their desire for that thing increases. The restriction amplifies rather than diminishes wanting. Scarcity drives pursuit. A man who is fully accessible has eliminated scarcity from the equation. The reactance mechanism has nothing to work with. Desire, lacking the pressure of potential restriction, settles rather than builds. Here is where the paradox that names this video becomes visible. The man who is trying hardest, making himself most available, signaling his interest most clearly, demonstrating his investment most thoroughly, is dismantling, with each additional effort, the very conditions that would make attraction possible. He is solving a problem she never had. She never needed to pursue his attention because she already had all of it. He has been thorough, careful, and consistent. And through that thoroughness, he has removed every mechanism through which desire builds. Enthusiasm, without selectivity, communicates that no standard was passed. His attention is unlimited, which means, functionally, it costs nothing to obtain. And what costs nothing to obtain tends to be valued accordingly. The correction is not to perform reluctance. It is to be a man whose attention is genuinely finite because it is genuinely directed at things that matter to him. The selectivity is real because the life is real. Sociologist Erving Goffman's work on social interaction introduced the concept of the frame, the implicit structure that determines how behavior within an encounter gets interpreted. Every interaction has one. The person who controls it exercises a form of authority over the exchange that is rarely articulated and almost always felt. In every early interaction between a man and a woman, there is a question running beneath the surface of everything said. Who is evaluating whom? The default answer, in most cases, is that the man is presenting himself. He is hoping to be found adequate. He is running the frame of an applicant, and she is occupying the position of evaluator. He may not be aware of it. She may not be consciously aware of it. But it structures every exchange, every word chosen, every pause before responding. The man who operates from the opposite frame is not performing disinterest. He is genuinely assessing. He is actually asking, across the interaction, whether this specific woman holds his interest and fits into a life that is already moving on its own terms. This is not an attitude that can be convincingly manufactured if the foundation is absent. A man who has built nothing, who has demanded nothing of himself, who has no particular standard for where his attention goes. That man cannot produce this frame convincingly because it does not reflect anything real. The man who has built something professionally, physically, in the quality of his thinking and his relationships, brings this frame naturally because it expresses a genuine reality. He's interested. He's also selective. Those two qualities together produce something entirely different from unguarded, eager interest alone. Judith Burgoon's expectation violations theory, developed in communication research, proposes that when a high-value individual, someone perceived as desirable or socially significant, departs from the expected behavioral script in a positive direction, the response is heightened attention. Burgoon tested this in communication contexts, not romantic ones specifically, but the logic extends cleanly. A woman with significant experience of men running the applicant frame encounters something genuinely unexpected in the man who does not. He holds his position in conversation rather than adjusting his opinions toward what seems likely to earn approval. He does not scramble to fill awkward silences. He expresses genuine disagreement calmly when he actually disagrees. That departure from the expected pattern registers as something unusual, and unusual demands attention. Now the test. Women test men, not always deliberately, not as a calculated strategy in most cases, as an instinctive calibration process designed to answer a single question. Is the presentation accurate, or does it give way under pressure? The test is typically low grade, a mild criticism delivered without clear justification, a moment of unexplained coldness, an unreasonable request stated as though it were ordinary. The content of the test is not the point. The point is what happens to the man's internal state when it arrives. The man who passes is not the one who has a prepared response. He is the one whose internal state genuinely does not change. He hears the challenge, registers it without alarm, and continues from the same position he was already occupying. Not dismissive, not escalating, simply unmoved, because his sense of himself does not depend on her approval of him in this moment. The man who fails does one of two things. He gets defensive, argues, pushes back, needs to win the point. Or he collapses, apologizes excessively, adjusts his behavior, becomes visibly anxious about whether the temperature has changed. Both responses communicate the same thing. She moved him. His internal state shifted when she applied minimal pressure. That is the information the test was designed to gather. The distinction is between a man who is internally stable and a man who is internally stable until tested. The second category is most men, and the woman who has encountered enough of them recognizes the difference within a single exchange. Machiavelli observed in The Prince that the ruler who cannot maintain his position under pressure has revealed that the position was never as secure as it appeared. Pressure does not create instability. It reveals instability that was already present. The same principle applies here. The test does not determine the man's quality, it reveals it. There is now substantial cultural instruction directed at men to open up. Show vulnerability. Share your feelings. Emotional transparency is presented as the correction to outdated masculine stoicism. The underlying research on attachment is real, and the long-term relationship application is legitimate. Emotional availability is genuinely associated with stable pair bonding across time. What the advice consistently conflates is early-stage attraction, which is governed by a specific set of psychological mechanisms, with long-term relationship maintenance, which is governed by a different set entirely. Applying the advice that works for established relationship stability to early-stage attraction produces results that feel like they should work and consistently do not. The distinction that actually matters is between emotional regulation and emotional disclosure. A man who is emotionally regulated has processed his experience. When he speaks to difficult territory, past failure, loss, hardship, he does so with the composure of someone who has already metabolized it. He is not using the conversation to process. He has processed. What he is communicating through that composure is that he has capacity. He has been tested. He has developed rather than cracked. That reads as depth. A man who discloses heavily and early, who shares emotional content while implicitly requiring the other person to respond in a particular way in order for him to feel okay, is asking her to manage something that belongs to him. The response this generates is not attraction, it is sometimes compassion, sometimes a protective instinct. But compassion and desire are not the same psychological system, and they do not co-activate reliably. A woman can feel genuine warmth toward a man, genuine concern for his well-being, and simultaneously remove him from the category of men she pursues. The men who experience this pattern, cared for without being desired, have often made the disclosure error. They gave the interaction a weight that was not yet structural. The rule is not that a man should be impenetrable. It is that his emotional regulation cannot be outsourced to the person he is trying to attract. Now, the silence mechanism. In 1994, behavioral economist George Loewenstein published a foundational paper in Psychological Bulletin framing curiosity as a response to information gaps. Curiosity, in his model, is not generated by ignorance. It is generated by the awareness of a gap, knowing enough to recognize that more exists without having enough to feel complete. The gap between what is known and what could be known creates a forward pull. The brain does not rest easily with unresolved information. Lowenstein developed this in the context of general curiosity and learning, but the mechanism applies wherever the brain is processing another person. A person who reveals themselves fully in early interactions closes the information gap before curiosity can develop. Everything is accessible. There is nothing left to be curious about. The forward-pulling mechanism goes dormant. A person who reveals themselves selectively, not strategically, but because they are not compelled to fill every silence or expand every answer past what was asked, leaves the gap open. There is clearly more there. The other person knows it. They don't have all of it yet. And the incompleteness generates continued engagement in exactly the way Lowenstein's model would predict. This is not evasiveness. A vague man is not mysterious. He is simply inconclusive, and the distinction is perceptible. A man who speaks with precision, who responds to questions with considered brevity rather than eager elaboration, who does not narrate his thought process in real time or volunteer emotional content before it is warranted. That man generates a different quality of attention. The information gap stays open. The curiosity that fills it persists. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are. The context was political. The strategic value of being legible enough on the surface while remaining opaque at the level that determines outcomes. What the observation points toward, by reasonable extension, is this: a man who is fully mapped, whose interior is entirely available and on display, has given the other person something that requires no further investigation. A man who is warm, present, and clearly intelligent but not fully known. That man gives her something to think about in the hours after the conversation ends. None of what has been described across the preceding laws functions as a collection of techniques that can be extracted and applied independently. The man who is trying to manufacture unpredictability will eventually betray the effort. The man who is performing emotional regulation will crack under sustained pressure. The man who is engineering information gaps will be detected because the gaps feel deliberate rather than natural. Every approach applied without the underlying foundation has a shelf life. The performance eventually requires more energy than it can sustain, and it gives way at precisely the moment the stakes are highest. What the preceding laws describe is not a set of behaviors, it is a state. And the state has only one durable source. The men who move through the world in the way this analysis describes, genuinely occupied, genuinely selective, genuinely unmoved by individual outcomes, are not applying anything. They are expressing something that is already true about them. Their time is finite, because what they are building with it is real. Their attention is selective because their standards are actual. Their internal state holds under pressure because it is not contingent on any single external outcome. This state cannot be built toward attraction specifically. That is the deepest paradox in this entire analysis. A man who begins developing his life because he wants to become more attractive to women is starting from the wrong premise, and the wrong premise tends to produce the wrong result. The improvements he makes are in service of external validation, which means the underlying dependency, the one that was producing the behavior that was making him unattractive, has not been resolved. It has simply been redirected. He is still organizing his development around what other people will think of it. The anxiety is still there. It just has a gym membership and a better wardrobe now. The only version of this that holds is built for its own sake. A man who develops his professional capacity because the work demands it. Who maintains his physical condition because he has decided that is the relationship he wants with his body. who reads and thinks because he is genuinely curious about the world, who has a social environment of people he actually respects. Across all of these investments, over real time, a man builds something that cannot be simulated in a single interaction, a life that has independent value, an identity that does not require external romantic validation in order to feel intact. Machiavelli drew this distinction in The Prince, most explicitly in Chapter 6. He separated the prince who rose by his own capability, his own developed judgment, his own arms, his own built quality as a leader, from the prince who rose through the favor of others, through fortune, through circumstances that happened to be in his favor. The first holds his position because it rests on something internal. The second is always precarious. What fortune gives, fortune can take away. What others provide, others can withdraw. Applied here, the man whose sense of himself is contingent on how a specific woman responds to him in a specific interaction has handed over something that should belong to him. His internal state is on loan to her. Her warmth makes him confident. Her coldness destabilizes him. He needs the interaction to go a particular way in order to feel okay. And she can feel this, not because she has analyzed it, but because the human nervous system is sensitive to dependency, and dependency reads as something other than security. The man who would be genuinely fine either way has not handed that over. He is present because he wants to be, not because he needs the interaction to validate something. He is warm because that is who he is, not because warmth is a strategy to secure a particular response. He is interested in her because she has earned his interest, and he would stop being interested if she stopped earning it. This is not detachment. It is the natural orientation of a man who has enough internal substance that no single interaction defines anything about his life. That man does not try harder when she pulls back. He is occupied. He does not flood her with messages designed to resolve his own anxiety. He is simply busy because there are other things in his life worth his attention. He does not perform casualness. He is casual because the outcome, while desired, is not required. And that is the resolution of the paradox this video began with. The more you try, the less she wants you. Not because trying is inherently wrong, but because trying in the way most men try communicates dependency, eliminates uncertainty, removes scarcity, and closes every information gap that was generating her interest. The trying is producing the opposite of what the man intends. The man who stops trying, not strategically, but because he has built enough that the trying is no longer necessary, is what the trying was always attempting to become. Build that. Everything described here is a byproduct. There are no moves in this analysis that work in isolation. None of the laws described here function as tactics that can be extracted from their context and applied strategically without the foundation underneath them. What this analysis describes, taken together, is a coherent state. And that state has only one source. A man who has invested sufficiently in his own development, over real time, for reasons that have nothing to do with attracting women, arrives at this state naturally. The unpredictability is natural because his life demands his attention. The selectivity is real because his standards are real. The internal stability holds under pressure because it is not contingent on any particular external outcome. The man who is trying to learn attraction is asking the wrong question. The right question is what he is building and why, and whether it would matter to him regardless of how any specific woman responded to it. Machiavelli's distinction between the ruler who holds his position because of his own developed capability and the ruler who holds it through fortune and the favor of others points to the same truth. Power built on external conditions is always conditional. Power built on what a man has actually become is not. The men who attract without trying are not running a better strategy. They have become something that the strategy was always trying to approximate from the outside. The approximation never quite holds. The real thing does not require holding. That is the work, and it has nothing to do with her.